I've been driving long haul for 15 years, covering routes across 48 states, and I thought I'd seen everything the road could throw at me. Bad weather, aggressive drivers, mechanical breakdowns in the middle of nowhere. That's all part of the job. But what happened on Interstate 80 in Nevada last summer was different. It was the kind of thing that makes you question whether you really know what's out there in the dark stretches of highway that connect our country. My name is Mike Torres, and I drive for a mid-sized freight company based out of Bakersfield, California. Mostly, I haul consumer goods, electronics, clothing, household items, from distribution centers on the West Coast to retailers across the country. It's honest work, pays decent, and I like the independence of being on the road. The run that changed everything was supposed to be routine. I was hauling a full load of electronics from a warehouse in Reno to a distribution center in Salt Lake City. The route takes you east on Interstate 80, through some of the most desolate country in America. Long stretches of desert and mountains where you might not see another vehicle for an hour or more. I'd left Reno around 9 p.m., planning to drive through the night and arrive in Salt Lake by early morning. The load was valuable enough that the company preferred overnight transport to minimize theft risk, and I was comfortable with night driving. After 15 years, you get used to the rhythm of the empty highways after dark. The first few hours went normally. I made good time through the Sierra Nevada foothills, stopped for fuel and a quick meal at a truck stop in Fernley, and headed out into the Nevada desert. The CB radio was quiet, except for occasional chatter from other drivers, and my GPS showed clear sailing all the way to Utah. It was around midnight when I first noticed the car. I was about an hour east of Fernley, somewhere around mile marker 230, when I saw headlights in my mirrors. Nothing unusual about that. Even on quiet stretches, you get the occasional late-night traveler. But this car stayed exactly the same distance behind me for nearly 20 miles, matching my speed perfectly. Most cars either pass trucks or fall behind, depending on how fast they want to go. This one just hung there, maybe a quarter mile back, keeping pace like it was following me. I tried speeding up slightly, then slowing down, but the car maintained the same distance. When I changed lanes, it changed lanes. When I moved back, it moved back. Finally, I got on the CB to see if any other drivers had noticed anything unusual. Breaker 19. This is Cali Mike eastbound on 80 at mile marker 245. Anyone else seeing a four-wheeler that's acting strange out here? A voice crackled back immediately. That's a 10-4, Cali Mike. Got a dark sedan that's been pacing me for the last 30 miles. Thought maybe it was a cop, but no lights or markings. Same here. You try to lose him? Negative. Every time I change speed or lanes, he matches exactly. Starting to creep me out. I looked in my mirrors again. The headlights were still there, unwavering, like they were connected to my truck by an invisible tether. What's your 20? I asked the other driver. Just past mile marker 252, eastbound. That didn't make sense. If he was ahead of me and we were both being followed by similar cars, that would mean there were at least two vehicles exhibiting the same strange behavior. But the stretch of I-80 we were on was completely empty, except for us truckers and these mysterious followers. Breaker 19, this is Desert Dog westbound at mile marker 260. You boys might want to be careful out there. I've been seeing some weird stuff the last few nights. A new voice had joined the conversation, an older driver who sounded like he'd been on these roads for decades. What kind of weird stuff, Desert Dog? Cars that ain't quite right, following patterns that don't make sense. And there's something else, mile marker 247. You boys watch yourselves when you hit 247. What's at mile marker 247? Just be careful. That's all I'm gonna say. The CB went quiet after that, despite my attempts to get Desert Dog to elaborate. I checked my GPS. Mile marker 247 was still about 10 miles ahead. I tried to focus on the road and ignore the car behind me, but it was impossible. Every time I glanced in my mirrors, those headlights were there, constant and unwavering. I started timing the gap between my truck and the car, and it never varied by more than a few seconds. No human driver is that consistent. As I approached mile marker 247, I noticed other things that didn't seem right. The radio stations on my AM/FM had all gone to static. My cell phone showed no signal, which wasn't unusual in rural Nevada. but the GPS was acting up too. The screen kept flickering and showing incorrect locations. Then I saw the rest stop. It wasn't marked on my GPS or in any of the truck stop guides I carried, but there it was on the right side of the highway. A small parking area with a few buildings, dimly lit by old-style streetlights. The sign read Mile 247, Rest Area, 24-hour facilities. I'd driven this route dozens of times over the years, and I'd never seen this rest stop before. But what really caught my attention were the vehicles in the parking lot. There had to be 15 or 20 cars and trucks, all parked in neat rows, all facing the same direction. And they all looked old. Not classic cars, but vehicles from maybe the 70s and 80s, in various states of wear. As I passed the rest stop, I could see people moving around between the vehicles. They moved slowly, deliberately, like they were following some kind of routine. But in the brief glimpse I got, something about them looked wrong. Their movements were too stiff, too mechanical. Breaker 19. Anyone else seeing this rest stop at mile marker 247? Silence on the CB. I tried again. This is Cali Mike. Does anyone copy? Nothing but static. I checked my mirrors. The car was still there, but now there were more headlights behind it. 3 or 4 vehicles, all maintaining the same precise following distance, all moving in perfect synchronization. My heart started racing. I pushed down harder on the accelerator, bringing my speed up to nearly 80 miles per hour. The following vehicles matched my speed exactly. That's when I noticed that my fuel gauge was reading differently than it had an hour earlier. Instead of showing 3/4 full, it now read completely full, like I just topped off the tank. And my odometer seemed to have stopped advancing. It showed the same mileage it had when I'd passed the rest stop. I tried the CB again. Mayday, Mayday. This is Cali Mike on I-80 eastbound. I need assistance. A voice crackled through the static, but it wasn't from another trucker. It was a woman's voice, thin and distant, like it was coming from very far away. Mike? Is that you? I recognized the voice, and it made my blood run cold. It was my ex-wife, Linda, who had died in a car accident 3 years earlier. Linda? That's impossible. You're late, Mike. You were supposed to meet me here. Meet you where? Linda, you're dead. At the rest stop. Mile marker 247. I've been waiting so long. I looked in my mirrors again. The following vehicles had spread out across all lanes of the highway, blocking any possibility of passing or changing direction. And in the distance behind them, I could see the lights of the rest stop, even though I'd passed it several miles back. Linda, I don't understand what's happening. You have to turn around, Mike. Come back to the rest stop. We're all waiting for you. Who's waiting? Everyone who never made it home. The radio went dead, leaving only the sound of my engine and the road noise. I looked at my GPS, but the screen was completely black now. My speedometer showed I was still doing 80, but the landscape outside looked like it was moving in slow motion. And then I saw the exit. It wasn't on any map I'd ever seen, but there it was. Exit 247B, rest area. The off-ramp curved back toward what should have been empty desert, but I could see lights in the distance, the same lights I'd seen at the mysterious rest stop. The following vehicles behind me had closed the gap and were now directly behind my trailer, their headlights reflecting off my mirrors so brightly I could barely see. I had no choice but to take the exit. The off-ramp led to a circular parking area surrounded by old-style buildings, a diner, a gas station, a small motel, all lit by the same dim streetlights I'd seen from the highway. And there were people everywhere, standing next to vehicles, walking between the buildings, all moving with that same stiff, mechanical gait. I parked my truck in an empty space and climbed down from the cab. The air was cold and still, with no wind at all, which was unusual for the Nevada desert. And everything was quiet. No engine noise, no conversation, no sounds of any kind except for my own footsteps on the asphalt. A woman approached me from the direction of the diner. It was Linda, looking exactly as she had the day she died, wearing the same blue dress she'd been buried in. "You made it," she said, smiling. "I knew you'd find your way here eventually." "Linda, what is this place?" "It's where we end up when we don't make it to our destination. All of us who were traveling somewhere and never arrived." She gestured toward the other people in the parking area. Now that I looked closer, I could see that they were all dressed in clothing from different eras: 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And they all had the same expression, a kind of patient waiting, like they were expecting something that hadn't happened yet. These are all people who died in car accidents? Car accidents, heart attacks, breakdowns in the desert, getting lost and running out of gas. Anyone who started a journey and never finished it. But I'm not dead. I'm still driving my route. Linda's smile faded. Are you sure about that, Mike? That's when I remembered. The memory came flooding back like water through a broken dam. I'd been driving east on Interstate 80, somewhere around mile marker 240, when I'd started feeling chest pains. Sharp, shooting pains that made it hard to breathe. I tried to pull over, but the pain had gotten worse, spreading down my left arm, making it hard to steer. The last thing I remembered was seeing mile marker 247 in my headlights. And then... the heart attack, I said. You pulled over just past the marker, Linda said gently. They found your truck the next morning. You'd been dead for several hours. I looked around the rest stop, really seeing it for the first time. The vehicles weren't just old. They were the actual cars and trucks these people had been driving when they died. The buildings weren't real. They were the collective memory of every roadside stop, every place travelers had hoped to reach for help or rest. So, this is where I am now? Forever? Not forever, Linda said. Just until you're ready to let go of the road. Let go of what? The need to keep driving, to reach your destination, to complete your route. All of us here, we died with unfinished business, places we needed to be, people we needed to see. So we keep driving the same roads, following the same patterns, hoping that this time we'll make it home. I thought about my truck, my route, the load of electronics I was supposed to deliver to Salt Lake City. Even in death, I'd been trying to complete the job. What happens when I let go? I don't know, Linda said, but I think it's better than staying here. Over the next few hours, or what felt like hours in a place where time didn't seem to work normally, Linda showed me around the rest stop. I met other drivers, other travelers, all with similar stories of journeys interrupted by death. Some had been there for decades, still checking their watches, still worried about arrival times for deliveries that would never be made. There was a truck driver from the 70s who died in a blizzard while hauling cattle to market. A family from the 80s who'd gotten lost in the desert and died of dehydration. A businessman from the 90s who'd had a stroke while driving to an important meeting. All of them trapped in the same loop, endlessly trying to complete trips that had ended the moment they died. How do I let go? I asked Linda. Stop worrying about the delivery. Stop thinking about the schedule. Stop trying to get somewhere else. It sounded simple, but it was harder than I expected. After 15 years of long-haul trucking, the need to keep moving, to maintain schedules, to complete routes had become part of my identity. Even knowing I was dead, I still felt the pull of the road, the obligation to deliver my load. But gradually, with Linda's help, I began to release those attachments. I stopped checking my watch, stopped thinking about arrival times, stopped worrying about the electronics sitting in my trailer. As I let go of these concerns, the rest stop began to change. The buildings became less solid, more translucent. The other travelers started to fade, one by one, as they also released their need to keep traveling. Linda was the last to go. Will I see you again? I asked. I don't know, she said. But I think where we're going, the roads are better. She faded away, leaving me alone in the empty parking area. My truck was still there, but it looked different now. Older, more worn, like it had been sitting abandoned for months. I climbed into the cab one last time, not to drive anywhere, but just to say goodbye to the vehicle that had been my home and office for so many years. As I sat in the driver's seat, I felt a profound sense of peace. Like I was finally free from the endless cycle of routes and schedules and deadlines. The truck faded away beneath me, and I found myself standing on empty asphalt under a star-filled sky. Then everything went white. I don't know where I am now, or if "where" is even the right word. But I'm not driving anymore, not trying to get somewhere else. not worried about making delivery schedules. Sometimes I think I can hear the sound of trucks on distant highways, other drivers still running their routes, still racing against time to reach destinations that matter to them. And sometimes I wonder if any of them will end up at mile marker 247, looking for a rest stop that appears only to those who can't finish their journey. If you're a driver reading this, if you ever find yourself on Interstate 80 in Nevada late at night and you see a rest stop at mile marker 247 that's not on any map, keep driving. Don't stop. Don't look back. And don't listen to voices on the CB that sound like people you used to know. Just keep moving toward wherever you're supposed to be, and be grateful that you still have somewhere to go. I've been an owner-operator for 12 years, running my own Peterbilt 379 on whatever loads I can find through freight brokers and load boards. It's not easy work. You're constantly chasing the next job, dealing with dispatchers who lowball your rates, and making sure your truck stays running while you cover your overhead. But it's honest work, and when you find a good load that pays well, it can make the lean times worth it. That's why I didn't ask too many questions when I got the call about the Meridian Industries load. My name is Danny Reeves, and I operate out of a small town called Cedar Rapids in Iowa. I specialize in refrigerated loads, produce, meat, dairy products, anything that needs to stay cold during transport. The reefer market can be volatile, but the rates are usually better than dry van work, and I've built up a good reputation for on-time delivery and proper temperature control. I was at home for a rare 2-day break when my phone rang on a Thursday evening in September. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but that's not unusual in the trucking business. Brokers and dispatchers call from all kinds of different numbers. Danny Reeves Trucking, I answered. Mr. Reeves, this is Patricia Morse from Meridian Industries. We have an urgent refrigerated load that needs to move from our facility in Omaha to a research center in Denver. The load is extremely time-sensitive and temperature-critical. Are you available? Meridian Industries wasn't a company I'd heard of, but that didn't mean much. There are thousands of manufacturing and distribution companies across the country, and new ones pop up all the time. What's the time frame and rate? I asked. Pick up tomorrow afternoon, delivery by Saturday morning. The load pays $4,000. I nearly dropped the phone. $4,000 for a 600-mile run was exceptional money, more than double the going rate for that distance. Either it was legitimate high-value cargo that justified the premium, or something was wrong with the load. What kind of product are we talking about? I asked. Biological samples for medical research. Everything is properly packaged and labeled according to DOT regulations. The only special requirement is maintaining a constant temperature of -10 degrees Fahrenheit. -10 was cold, but not outside the range of my reefer unit. And biological samples for medical research sounded legitimate enough. Pharmaceutical companies and research institutions ship that kind of material all the time. Send me the load details and I'll take it, I said. Patricia Morse emailed me the bill of lading and pickup information within an hour. Everything looked standard. Proper documentation, legitimate-looking company letterhead, even insurance certificates. The pickup was scheduled for Friday afternoon at a Meridian Industries facility in an industrial park on the south side of Omaha. Friday morning, I pre-tripped my truck, checked the reefer unit, and headed west on Interstate 80 toward Nebraska. The drive to Omaha took about 7 hours, and I arrived at the Meridian Industries facility around 3 p.m. The building was smaller than I'd expected, a single-story warehouse in a mostly empty industrial park. There were only a few other businesses in the area, and most of them looked like they'd been closed for a while. But the Meridian Industries building was clearly active, with several cars in the parking lot and lights on inside. I backed up to the loading dock and went inside to check in with the shipping department. The interior was clean and modern, with white walls, fluorescent lighting, and the kind of sterile atmosphere you'd expect from a medical facility. A man in his 50s wearing a lab coat met me at the reception desk. Mr. Reeves, I'm Dr. Harrison. We spoke with Patricia Morse about your load. That's right, ready to get loaded and head to Denver. Dr. Harrison nodded and led me back to the loading dock. The cargo is extremely valuable, Mr. Reeves. 30 years of research, irreplaceable biological samples, that sort of thing. It's critical that the temperature never varies from -10 degrees. My reefer unit is reliable, I said. I've hauled sensitive medical cargo before. The loading crew brought out 6 large white containers, each about the size of a footlocker, all heavily insulated and marked with biohazard symbols and temperature warnings. They loaded them carefully into my trailer, using special brackets to secure them against movement. The containers have their own internal monitoring systems, Dr. Harrison explained. If the temperature rises above -8 degrees, an alarm will sound. If it rises above -5 degrees, you need to call us immediately. He handed me a business card with a 24-hour emergency number. The delivery address in Denver is a research facility associated with the University of Colorado. They'll be expecting you Saturday morning between 8 and 10 a.m. I signed the paperwork, sealed the trailer, and set the reefer unit to -10 degrees. The temperature came down quickly, and within 30 minutes, the unit was maintaining perfect cold levels. I pulled out of the Meridian Industries facility around 4:30 p.m. and headed east to pick up I-76, which would take me southeast through Nebraska and into Colorado. The route was familiar. I'd hauled loads to Denver dozens of times over the years. The first few hours of the drive went normally. I stopped for fuel and a quick meal at a truck stop in Kearney, Nebraska, checked the reefer unit, still running perfectly at -10 degrees, and continued toward Colorado. Around 11 p.m., I was about 50 miles west of North Platte when I started hearing sounds from the trailer. At first, I thought it was just the normal creaking and settling you get with any load, especially on a refrigerated trailer where the metal contracts and expands with temperature changes. But these sounds were different. Rhythmic tapping, like someone was knocking on the inside walls of the trailer. I pulled over at the next rest area and walked back to check the trailer. The reefer unit was running normally. The temperature was holding steady at -10 degrees, and the doors were properly sealed. But I could definitely hear the tapping sounds, coming from inside the trailer near where the containers were secured. I called the emergency number Dr. Harrison had given me. Meridian Industries emergency line, a woman's voice answered. It sounded like Patricia Morse. This is Danny Reeves. I'm hauling your load to Denver, and I'm hearing unusual sounds from inside the trailer. Should I be concerned? What kind of sounds? Tapping, like someone knocking on the walls. There was a long pause. Mr. Reeves, the containers are sealed and contain only biological samples. There shouldn't be any sounds. Are you certain the reefer unit is maintaining proper temperature? Temperature is perfect, -10 degrees exactly. Then continue to Denver. Do not open the trailer under any circumstances. The cargo is extremely sensitive to temperature and light exposure. The call ended, leaving me with more questions than answers. But the load was paying $4,000, and I'd committed to delivering it. I climbed back into the cab and continued toward Colorado. The tapping sounds continued for the next hour, sometimes quiet, sometimes loud enough that I could hear them over the road noise and engine. Around midnight, as I was climbing into the foothills of Colorado, the sounds changed. Instead of tapping, I started hearing voices. They were muffled by the insulation and the road noise, but they were definitely human voices, men and women, talking in what sounded like normal conversation. But the words were unclear, like listening to people talk in the next room through a thick wall. I tried to convince myself it was CB radio chatter bleeding through my radio speakers, or maybe sounds from passing vehicles. But the voices were coming from behind me, from the direction of the trailer. At a truck stop in Sterling, Colorado, I pulled over again and called the emergency number. This is Danny Reeves again. I'm now hearing voices from inside the trailer. Mr. Reeves, that's impossible. The cargo consists of biological samples in sealed containers. I know what I'm hearing. There are people talking inside my trailer. The cargo is extremely valuable, Mr. Reeves. If you abandon or tamper with the load, you'll be liable for replacement costs in excess of $2 million. Continue to Denver and make your delivery. The threat was clear, but it didn't explain what I was experiencing. I walked around the trailer again, listening carefully. The voices were definitely coming from inside, and they seemed to be getting louder. I continued toward Denver, but the situation kept getting stranger. The voices became more distinct, and I started to make out individual words and phrases. How long have we been in here? I can't remember how I got here. It's so cold. Someone help us. Around 3 a.m., about 2 hours outside of Denver, I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled into an empty rest area and called 911, 911, what's your emergency? This is going to sound crazy, but I'm a truck driver hauling a refrigerated load, and I think there might be people trapped inside my trailer. Are you certain there are people in your trailer? I can hear them talking. They're asking for help. The dispatcher connected me to the Colorado State Patrol, and I explained the situation to a trooper who agreed to meet me at the rest area. 20 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up next to my truck. The trooper was a woman in her 40s, professional but clearly skeptical of my story. You think there are people inside your trailer? She asked. I know how it sounds, but I can hear them. They're talking, asking for help. We walked to the back of the trailer and listened. The voices were clearly audible, multiple people, men and women, having conversations that sounded like they were trying to figure out where they were and how they'd gotten there. Jesus, the trooper said. There really are people in there. Can we open it? Do you have the keys? I had the keys to the door locks, but breaking the seal would void my delivery contract and potentially make me liable for the cargo. But if there were people trapped inside, I didn't have a choice. We cut the seal and opened the trailer doors. The interior was empty. No containers, no cargo, no people. Just an empty refrigerated trailer running at -10 degrees. I don't understand, I said. The containers were here when I left Omaha. 6 large white containers with biohazard labels. The trooper shined her flashlight around the empty trailer. There's no sign that anything was ever loaded in here. No tie-down straps, no scuff marks, nothing. But we could still hear the voices coming from somewhere inside the empty trailer. Hello? The trooper called out. If someone's in here, make some noise. The voices stopped immediately, like someone had turned off a radio. We searched the trailer thoroughly, checked for hidden compartments, false walls, any place people could be concealed. But it was completely empty, and the voices had stopped entirely. Maybe it was CB radio interference, the trooper suggested. Sometimes signals can bounce around in strange ways. But I knew what I'd heard, and it wasn't radio interference. The trooper filed a report and let me continue to Denver, but I was supposed to deliver to a research facility that I was now certain didn't exist. Sure enough, when I arrived at the address on the bill of lading Saturday morning, there was nothing there. Just an empty lot with no building, no loading dock, no signs of any research facility. I called the emergency number for Meridian Industries, but the line was disconnected. I tried calling Patricia Morse directly, but that number was also out of service. That's when I realized I'd been scammed. But it wasn't a financial scam. The $4,000 had been deposited into my account as promised. It was something else, something I didn't understand. I drove back to Iowa with an empty trailer, trying to make sense of what had happened. Over the next few days, I did some research on Meridian Industries. The company didn't exist. The building in Omaha was a vacant warehouse that had been empty for over a year. The email address Patricia Morse had used was registered to a non-existent domain. But the money was real. $4,000, deposited from an account that the bank said belonged to a legitimate business entity. 2 weeks later, I got another call from Patricia Morse. Mr. Reeves, we have another urgent load that needs to move from Omaha to Denver. Same rate, same specifications. That's impossible, I said. Your company doesn't exist. We'll see you Friday afternoon at the usual location. The line went dead. I didn't take the load, obviously, but I was curious enough to drive to Omaha and check the industrial park where I'd supposedly picked up the cargo. The building was still empty, still vacant, with no signs of recent activity. But I talked to some other drivers at truck stops, asking if anyone had heard of similar experiences. What I learned made my blood run cold. Over the past 5 years, at least a dozen drivers had reported hauling phantom loads for companies that didn't exist, picking up cargo that disappeared during transport, delivering to addresses that turned out to be empty lots. All of them had been paid the promised rate, and all of them had heard voices from inside their trailers. One driver, a guy named Pete from Missouri, told me his story. He'd hauled a similar load for a company called Biotech Solutions, picking up containers in Kansas City and delivering to a lab in Phoenix. During the drive, he'd heard voices asking for help, begging to be let out. When he'd finally opened his trailer, it was empty. I did some digging, Pete said. Found out that Biotech Solutions was a real company. but they'd gone out of business 15 years ago. They used to transport human organs for transplant surgery. Another driver, Sarah from Texas, had hauled a load for a company called Mercy Medical Transport. Same story. Voices in the trailer, empty cargo area when opened, payment from a company that didn't exist. I researched Mercy Medical, she said. They were shut down by the FDA in the 90s for improper handling of human tissue samples. Dozens of people died because of contaminated transplant organs. I started to see a pattern. All of these phantom companies had been involved in transporting biological materials, organs, tissue samples, research specimens. And all of them had been shut down or gone out of business due to scandals involving the mistreatment or mishandling of human remains. I think what's happening is that we're being recruited to transport the voices of people who died because of these companies' negligence. People who never received the organ transplants they needed. Patients who died from contaminated tissue. Research subjects whose remains were mishandled. They're still trying to reach their destinations, still hoping to be delivered to the places where they might have been helped or treated with dignity. And somehow, they're able to manifest through the transportation network, using drivers like us to carry their voices toward destinations they'll never reach. I still get calls from Patricia Morse every few months, offering me loads for Meridian Industries. The rate keeps going up. Last month she offered me $6,000 for the same run to Denver. But I don't take those loads anymore. Instead, I've started researching the companies that contact me, making sure they're legitimate before I accept any cargo. And I've been talking to other drivers, spreading the word about phantom loads and how to recognize them. But sometimes, late at night when I'm driving an empty trailer, I hear faint voices coming from the cargo area. Voices of people who are still trying to get home, still hoping for delivery to destinations they'll never reach. And I wonder if, by refusing to haul their phantom loads, I'm leaving them stranded forever in some kind of transportation limbo, unable to complete their final journey. It's a guilt I carry with every mile I drive. I've been driving truck for 22 years, and in all that time, I've never heard anything on the CB radio that scared me. Sure, you get the usual weirdos and pranksters, especially late at night when the atmospheric conditions make signals bounce farther than they should. But what started happening last winter on the stretch of Interstate 40 between Flagstaff and Albuquerque was different. It was the kind of thing that made me question whether our CB radios are really just picking up transmissions from other drivers. My name is Carl Brennan, and I run solo for a regional carrier based out of Phoenix, Arizona. Mostly I haul dry goods, retail merchandise, construction materials, automotive parts, on routes throughout the Southwest. It's steady work, and after more than 2 decades behind the wheel, I know every mile of highway between Los Angeles and Denver. The incident started on a cold February night, when I was hauling a load of furniture from Phoenix to a distribution center in Oklahoma City. It was a long run, about 900 miles, and I was planning to drive straight through to make the Monday morning delivery appointment. I'd left Phoenix around 6 p.m. and was making good time across Arizona. By 10 p.m., I was climbing into the mountains east of Flagstaff, with fresh snow on the shoulders and that crisp, clean air you get at 7,000 feet elevation. That's when I first heard the voice on Channel 19. It started as static, the kind of atmospheric interference you sometimes get in mountainous areas. But gradually, a voice emerged from the noise. A man speaking clearly but quietly, like he was trying not to wake someone up. Eastbound driver at mile marker 208. This is Bear Mountain. You need to slow down. I checked my GPS. I was at mile marker 207, doing about 65 in a 70 zone. Nothing dangerous about my speed, and there was no truck in front of me or behind me that I could see. I keyed my microphone. Bear Mountain. This is Desert Express eastbound at 207. Road looks clear to me. What's the situation? No response, just static. A few minutes later, as I passed mile marker 208, I saw why Bear Mountain had warned me to slow down. There was a car pulled over on the shoulder, hazard lights flashing, steam rising from under the hood. A woman was standing next to the vehicle, waving for help. I pulled over and called 911 to report the stranded motorist, then waited until the state patrol arrived to make sure she was safe. The whole incident took about 30 minutes, and I probably wouldn't have noticed her if Bear Mountain hadn't told me to slow down. Back on the road, I tried to thank whoever had given me the heads up. Bear Mountain, this is Desert Express. Thanks for the warning about the stranded motorist. How'd you spot her from wherever you were? Again, no response. I figured Bear Mountain was probably a local driver who knew the area well. Maybe someone who'd passed the broken-down car a few minutes before I did. The CB radio network is like that. Drivers looking out for each other, sharing information about road conditions and hazards. But over the next few hours, as I continued across Arizona and into New Mexico, I kept hearing Bear Mountain's voice, always warning drivers about dangers ahead. Westbound at mile marker 325, this is Bear Mountain. Watch for black ice on the downgrade. Southbound on 285, this is Bear Mountain. Drunk driver weaving in the left lane about 2 miles ahead of you. Eastbound convoy approaching Gallup. This is Bear Mountain. Speed trap at the truck stop. Locals running radar. Each warning turned out to be accurate. I saw the black ice, other drivers reported the drunk driver, and sure enough, there were local cops with radar guns at the truck stop outside Gallup. But here's what bothered me. I never heard Bear Mountain talking to other drivers. Never heard him respond to questions or engage in the usual CB chatter. He only gave warnings, always accurate, always helpful, but never social. Around 2 a.m., as I was crossing the Continental Divide west of Albuquerque, I heard something that made me really pay attention. Desert Express eastbound at mile marker 140. This is Bear Mountain. You need to check your right front tire. I was at mile marker 139, so he was tracking my location precisely. But more importantly, I hadn't noticed any problems with my tires. Everything felt normal. No vibration, no pulling, no warning signs. Bear Mountain, this is Desert Express. Tires feel fine to me. What are you seeing? No response, as usual. But I decided to pull over at the next truck stop and do a walk-around inspection anyway. Better safe than sorry, especially with a heavy load on mountain roads. At the Flying J in Gallup, I checked all my tires carefully with a flashlight. The right front tire looked normal from the outside, but when I thumped it with a tire thumper, it sounded wrong. Flat instead of the solid thunk you want to hear. I checked the air pressure and found that the tire was down to 30 psi, about half of what it should have been. A slow leak that would have eventually caused a blowout. Probably somewhere in the middle of the New Mexico desert, where help would have been hours away. I had the tire repaired at the truck stop and continued toward Oklahoma City. But now I was really curious about Bear Mountain. How had he known about my tire problem before I did? How was he tracking multiple trucks across hundreds of miles of highway? And why did he never respond to direct questions? Over the next few months, I started paying closer attention to CB radio chatter, especially on my regular runs through Arizona and New Mexico. Bear Mountain was always there, giving warnings, helping drivers avoid accidents and problems. Other truckers had started to depend on him, talking about him like he was some kind of guardian angel of the highways. Anyone heard from Bear Mountain tonight? Bear Mountain saved my bacon last week, warned me about a rock slide before I hit it. That Bear Mountain guy knows everything that's happening on these roads. But nobody had ever met Bear Mountain in person. Nobody knew what he looked like or what kind of truck he drove. He was just a voice on the radio, always helpful, always accurate, always mysterious. I started asking around at truck stops, talking to drivers who'd been on the roads for decades, trying to find out if anyone knew who Bear Mountain really was. That's when I met Hank Morrison, a 70-year-old driver who'd been hauling freight since the 1970s. Hank was having coffee at a pilot travel center in Amarillo when I sat down next to him and started asking about unusual CB radio experiences. Bear Mountain? Hank said when I mentioned the name. Hell, I remember Bear Mountain, but that was a long time ago. What do you mean? Bear Mountain was a driver. Real name was Pete Kowalski. Ran a Kenworth conventional, hauled steel and heavy machinery all over the Southwest. Good man, always looking out for other drivers. Always first to help when someone was in trouble. Was? Hank stirred his coffee slowly. Pete died in a wreck about 15 years ago. Winter night, black ice on Interstate 40 west of Flagstaff. Jackknifed and went off the road, truck caught fire. They said he died instantly. Are you sure we're talking about the same Bear Mountain? Pete's handle was Bear Mountain because he grew up in Montana, near Glacier National Park. Used Channel 19, always giving warnings about road conditions, helping drivers avoid problems. Hank looked at me seriously. Why are you asking about him? I told Hank about my experiences with Bear Mountain over the past few months. The accurate warnings, the helpful advice, the mysterious ability to track multiple trucks across vast distances. Hank listened without interrupting, then shook his head. Son, Pete Kowalski has been dead for 15 years. If you're hearing Bear Mountain on the radio, you're either picking up some kind of echo transmission or what? Or Pete's still out there, still trying to help drivers, still doing what he always did best. That night, as I drove through New Mexico toward Texas, I thought about what Hank had told me. Was it possible that Pete Kowalski was somehow still communicating on Channel 19, 15 years after his death? Around midnight, I decided to test the theory. Bear Mountain, this is Desert Express eastbound on 40. If you can hear me, I'd like to ask you something. Static for a few minutes, then, go ahead, Desert Express. It was the first time Bear Mountain had ever responded to me directly. Bear Mountain, are you Pete Kowalski? A long pause, longer than usual. How do you know that name? I met a driver named Hank Morrison. He said he knew you back in the day. Hank Morrison. Haven't heard that name in a while. How's old Hank doing? He's still driving, still drinking too much coffee at truck stops. I heard what might have been laughter through the static. That sounds like Hank. Tell him Pete said hello. Pete, Hank told me you died in a wreck 15 years ago. Another long pause. I did. I-40 west of Flagstaff, mile marker 204. Black ice, lost control, went off the road. Then how are we talking right now? I don't really know. All I know is that I'm still here, still monitoring the roads, still trying to help drivers avoid the kind of accident that got me. I tried to process what I was hearing. According to the voice on the radio, I was talking to a dead man who had somehow remained connected to the CB network, using it to continue his life's work of helping other truckers. Pete, are you stuck here? Is there something keeping you from moving on? I think I'm here by choice. These roads, this work, looking out for other drivers. It's what I did when I was alive, and it's what gives my existence meaning now. Over the next hour, Pete told me about his experiences since the accident. He could somehow perceive multiple trucks across hundreds of miles of highway, monitoring their speed, their condition, the road hazards they were approaching. He couldn't interact with the physical world, but he could use CB radio to warn drivers about dangers. It's like I'm connected to the highway itself, he explained. I can sense when something's wrong. A tire going flat, ice forming on the road, a drunk driver weaving between lanes. And I can see further ahead than any living driver, warn people about problems before they encounter them. Don't you ever want to rest? To go wherever people go when they die? Maybe someday. But right now, there are drivers out there who need help, who might not make it home without a warning about black ice or a reminder to check their equipment. As long as I can help prevent accidents, save lives, I think I need to stay. We talked for another hour as I drove through the New Mexico desert. Pete told me stories about his life as a trucker, about Hank Morrison and other drivers he'd known, about the changes he'd seen in the industry over the decades. The trucks are better now, he said. Safer, more reliable. But the roads are more crowded, drivers are more rushed, and there are more distractions. Sometimes I feel like I'm needed more now than I was when I was alive. As the sun came up over Texas, Pete's voice started to fade. I need to go, he said. Daylight makes it harder for me to maintain the connection. But I'll be back tonight, and every night, watching over the roads. Will I be able to talk to you again? Probably not like this. Direct conversation takes a lot of energy, but I'll still be here, still giving warnings when drivers need them. The radio went quiet, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the sound of the road. Over the next year, I continued to hear Bear Mountain's warnings on Channel 19, but he never responded to my attempts at conversation again. He went back to being just a helpful voice, warning drivers about hazards, helping them avoid accidents and breakdowns. I told a few other drivers about my conversation with Pete Kowalski. but most of them thought I was either making it up or had been talking to someone playing an elaborate prank. Only Hank Morrison believed me, and he said it sounded exactly like something Pete would do. That man spent his whole life helping other drivers, Hank said. Doesn't surprise me that he'd keep doing it after death. Last month, I was driving through Arizona again, approaching the area where Pete had died 15 years earlier. As I passed mile marker 204, I heard his voice one more time. Desert Express, this is Bear Mountain. Safe travels, and tell Hank I said to take care of himself. I will, Pete, and thank you. Just doing my job. I still hear Bear Mountain on the radio, still helping drivers, still preventing accidents. Sometimes I wonder if there are other deceased truckers out there, using whatever connection they can find to continue helping the living. The CB radio network is vast and mysterious, with signals bouncing around the atmosphere in ways that science doesn't fully understand. Maybe Pete Kowalski isn't the only driver who's found a way to stay connected to the roads after death. Maybe the highways are full of helpful spirits, watching over us, warning us about dangers we can't see ourselves. All I know is that when I hear Bear Mountain's voice on Channel 19, I listen carefully and follow his advice. Because in 22 years of driving, I've learned that the best warnings often come from the most unexpected sources. And sometimes, the people looking out for us are the ones who care too much to ever really leave.